question too. I was working with a client recently. We're going through the menu. They've been with the process for a long time. We were talking along the lines of certain postural deviations that I see pretty regularly, certain dysfunctions that I might see. And then they asked me, does everybody need posture exercises? Right? What do you think?
Yeah, I would say, well, a more comical way to kind of phrase that question as well, who needs posture exercises? And my answer would be yes. Absolutely. Just because, there's not an aspect of your life where posture does not come into play. A great example would be a lot of people think, well, athletes, even the top level of that, they are peak athleticism, peak everything, right? And that might be the case in at least what they specialize in their sport. Ironically, they turn out to maybe in some cases be some of the most dysfunctional from a body standpoint. I go back to anything you do exclusively for the majority of your time, the body's not meant to really do that. So I'm all about getting the body posturally aligned properly translates to just a better feeling life when you're not doing your sport. Say you're active just in your day-to-day life, just doing the same thing nonstop is going to just lead to chronic problems. That being aware of that posture and getting it lined up, I think, is a big way to fix that.
If you think about posture, what that really is a vehicle for is a vehicle for effortless quality, high quality movement, right? If your body is in alignment, you, me, the person walking down the street, your mom, your dad, we all have the same muscles and bones as humans, right? And each bone, each muscle has a specific job, and it's designed to accomplish a certain range of motion, right? So in perfect posture, all those muscles have an opportunity to work most efficiently, right? And with that becomes quality, effortless movement. Every bone, every muscle is doing its job correctly. Now, here's the rub, right? And like you'd said with high performance athletes, they are doing the same types of motions day in, day out. They're only using certain muscles and they're neglecting other muscles. Our bodies are very smart and it wants to work efficiently. And if it recognizes its patterns, be like, well, if I'm not using these muscles back here, let me just shut those up. I don't need them anymore. I'm not going to use them tomorrow, right? So then when you take your high performance athlete who's very used to doing a certain thing and you throw them into another activity, you take a very tight offensive lineman in football and you ask him to go swing a golf club, that's where we start to see some things go awry, right? That's where we get to see some pain, discomfort, and all that. Same thing for everybody. When she asked me that question, does everybody need posture exercises? Yes, we have a specific and ideal posture that we're all looking to achieve. I'm willing to bet that if I were to take a posture photo of every human on this earth, I would not find that perfect posture, right? That's just the byproduct of what we do day in, day out as daily life. So in a sense, yes. And not only because, not everybody's in pain, right? Not everybody is in pain, but the further away you are from ideal posture, the worse movement becomes, the more difficult movement becomes, and that's going to manifest in, could be in pain, could be in decreased energy, could be reduced blood flow, could be worse sleep. On the flip side of that, the closer we get to ideal posture, the more effortless movement becomes, the less pain we might meet, the less tension we'll have, the better where sleep becomes. Everything just goes on the up and up. So yeah, there's a lot of benefit to working on it.
Yeah, and even circling back to the original point of, well, we specialize in our lives, even if you're not doing sports. Like, we are creatures of habits. We just specialize in the same movements that we do every day. But to that, like, top peak athlete, would you say you give menus in some cases that are trying to set people's posture up to even perform that specialized movement better?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And, that activity is very important to them. So if we have a golfer who comes in and they have a hard time rotating a certain way, we're going to help facilitate that and identify what imbalances are present, right? And again, going back to working on posture, the better your posture becomes, the more efficient muscle. So if you have any specific restrictions in movement, working on those imbalances is going to help up free range of motion. It's going to help strengthen you in places where you need it, right? I think you've had a lot of dysfunction injury in your past, right?
That is correct. That I didn't
Done.
realize even until I found Egoscue kind of what it did to me posturally. But yeah, 5 torn ACLs, which leads to give or take 30 months of rehab, thrown in a couple torn meniscuses in there as well, and you got some dysfunctional knees, mainly due to football. But from that, it's something that I think back and I'm curious how that even happened to begin with. I was always the go hardcore, give full effort, run like an animal nonstop. I had no off switch. So with that said, I might have been just overdoing it muscularly to the point to where my knees, just because of the way that I was performing and just the habit of how I pushed myself. So, and then today what it led to is I've been on my left side so much more than my right for years, just out of pure habit, that I'm like, oh, well, why does my left hip start to hurt now? I've never had an issue with that. It was my right knee. Well, it's because I've been overusing now my good side for so long that I could be getting problems completely, in my mind, unrelated to my knee down the road, just because of essentially my posture, which was the way I was standing, the way I was distributing my weight, and combating that can end up maybe saving me hip problems down the road. So it's something that it can be a trickle-down effect, but it can also be a great thing in that you can trickle back up and solve many things that you thought were just things that you have to just deal with forever. Think about it from that standpoint.
How did you tear your ACLs again? I went through one ACL tear, and I can't imagine 5.
So it is fascinating because it feels like every possible way. The first time was very much made sense. Horse collar tackle, running with the football, guy grabs my collar from behind, knee just gets twisted up. Okay, I'll give my knee that. Anything would have given it under that circumstance. The second time, which was a full 12 months later, so should have been fully healed from that point, playing football again. I was just running at practice and literally just kind of dragged my foot, maybe in a divot or something, just went and snapped the ACL there. Third time, again, the following fall, third season in a row, going all out. First practice, I just plant and cut with the football. Heard just a little bit of a pop. Turned out it was just a slight bucket tear in the meniscus. But since I had already had 2 full surgeries, I decided, well, I don't want to go under the knife again. I'm in the season. The doctor's like, well, you could just be off a few weeks, rehab, and just try and get back on the field in a few weeks. My parents were like, okay, sure. I'm still 15 years old. We don't want to have that many surgeries. I get back on the field and pop after pop, game 4 and 5. I think by game 6, I am proud to say I finished my last ever game with a torn ACL because I'm like, I knew my knee was gone at that point, but I'm like, might as well finish it out because it might be my last one anyway. Go and get the MRI, and they're like, yeah, that ACL is just gone. So that was 3. And then 4 was just a freak accident, which is almost posture related because I was just kind of jumping down out of a truck and instinctively protected my right knee by landing exclusively on the left first. That rolled out from under me. And of all the injuries I could have sustained, broken arm, leg, neck, I tore the ACL on the left knee. So now we got 2. And then the 5th and final one, boring. I was just after graduation in high school, just playing sand volleyball, and I just fall in a little divot in the right leg. So that was the 5th and final one. But that's kind of opened my eyes to what it's like living with pain, and then understanding what it can do to a person, and then knowing, well, you're not at the mercy of it because there's so many avenues of addressing how you feel. So.
Do you feel like, had it not been for that horse collar, that initial injury, do you feel like things would have been better off, or was that really the catalyst to kind of spur things along? I'm curious.
You mean like just from like an injury standpoint, my chronic knee stuff?
Yeah.
Yeah, that is a great question because I don't think there's a actual answer, because I even went to like the Houston Texans Dr. Robert Lowe, he's on the field with the Texans. We went to everyone that was available in Houston, and they never really pinpointed the exact maybe reason. But my head, I originally would go to yes, if it was still the original, ligaments in my knee, would have the simple movements of dragging that knee had torn it then. In my mind, I would say it wouldn't have, but then trying to, think about it from a standpoint of, well, what were my biomechanics? Like maybe the way my bones are set up, or I go back to, I'm so quad dominant and so explosive that it was going to happen regardless. And it was just a bad coincidence. I got pulled from behind from that standpoint. That's why I almost wish I had the knowledge I had now to take, posture photos like what I was like then, be able to really evaluate kind of how my gait was, because I was, like I said, just all or nothing. And that might not be something I could answer, with full certainty, but it's something that it's interesting to think about.
It's hard to retrospectively think about that sometimes. It's like, well, what if? I mean, possibly theoretically, if you're so quad dominated in the football, that could have locked your hips to a point where when you were going to that horse collar, you didn't have the motion necessary in your hip to accommodate that. So all of that twisting, all that torsion when your knee just, I mean, it's interesting to think about. I think about that as well. I also had a ACL tear. It was non-contact. I just went up for a header in soccer. I landed fine, but then I took a step and then I planted and then it went. And, looking back, I mean, just the activities I did, I wasn't in any pain at all, too, at that point, so kind of looping it back to, can everybody use posture exercises or work on their posture? I was in no pain at all prior to that ACL tear. Back was feeling good. I'm very active in high school, but I had dysfunctions. I had restrictions, and it came to a point where it was the straw that broke the camel's back. ACL went, and thus started this journey. Had I been working on posture, improving my quality of movement, removing those restrictions, I can guarantee you that ACL tear wouldn't have happened. There's no reason for it to, right?
Yeah. You're telling me just being able to squat 600 pounds isn't the end all be all?
That's exactly right. Yeah.